Let's talk about the Indiana Fever. Next week, April the 3rd, there will be an expansion draft. And many people are wondering, how is that going to shape out? And then, of course, you've got other players that you're going to wonder about, like Sophie Cunningham.
The WNBA is about to do something to the Indiana Fever that no opponent ever could. Two brand new franchises are getting ready to walk into Indianapolis and legally take one of Caitlin Clark's most important teammates. No trade, no negotiation, no compensation, just gone. And the worst part, the Fever might not be able to do a single thing to stop it. Here's what's happening. The 2026 WNBA expansion draft is coming, likely in the first week of April. Two brand new franchises, the Toronto Tempo and the Portland Fire, need to build their rosters from scratch, and the way they do that is by rating yours. Every existing team has to submit a protection list. You get to protect 5 players. 5. Everyone else, they're available. The expansion teams each pick one unprotected player from every existing roster, and that player is theirs. If that sounds familiar to longtime Fever fans, it should. Indiana was literally born this way. Back in 2000, the Fever themselves were an expansion team built from players other franchises left exposed. Now, 26 years later, they're on the other side of it, and it stings a lot worse from this direction. Now, 5 protection spots sounds like enough until you actually look at Indiana's situation. Caitlin Clark is obviously protected. She's the face of the franchise, under contract through 2027, and letting her go would be organizational malpractice. Aliyah Boston is protected, still on her rookie deal, and the Clark-Boston pairing is the foundation of everything head coach Stephanie White is building in Indiana. Kelsey Mitchell is protected. She's the Fever's most reliable secondary scorer, the longest tenured player on the roster, and GM Amber Cox has made it crystal clear she intends to keep Mitchell in Indiana. That's 3, 2 spots left. Lexi Hull is almost certainly protected. She's a restricted free agent, meaning Indiana has the right to match any offer. Under Stephanie White's system, Hull's defensive versatility and 3-point shooting make her irreplaceable in the spacing and defensive schemes the Fever run. She guards the opponent's best perimeter player, she hits the open 3, and she does it all for the right price. She's locked in. And Makayla Timpson gets that 5th spot. She's one of the most dominant rebounders in the entire league, the kind of interior presence you simply cannot replace without spending top dollar. Her second chance points and paint dominance give the Fever a physical dimension that every championship team needs. She's young, she's improving, and she fits the timeline.
There's a way you can core players. You figure Kelsey Mitchell's probably one of those. Lexi Hull, I would guess, would be one of those. Caitlin Clark, Aliyah Boston, check. And most people believe Makayla Timpson due to the contract.
5 players, 5 spots, all spoken for, which means Sophie Cunningham, Clark's enforcer, best friend, and the emotional heartbeat of the Fever locker room is left completely unprotected. Let's be honest about what that means, because I don't think people fully appreciate how much of the Fever's identity is wrapped up in this one player. Sophie Cunningham isn't just a role player who happens to know Caitlin Clark. She's the person who changed the entire narrative around this team in a single moment. June 17th, Connecticut. Cunningham got into it with a Sun player after what she felt was a dirty play on Clark. She stood her ground. She took the flagrant foul. She made it crystal clear to the entire league that if you come for Caitlin Clark, there are consequences. That moment went viral instantly. It set a tone. It told every team in the league that the Indiana Fever aren't soft. They have someone who will fight for each other. And from that point forward, no one on the Fever's roster carried more cultural weight than Sophie Cunningham. She wasn't the best player on the team. She doesn't need to be. She's the one who makes the best player on the team feel safe. Beyond the enforcer role, the Clark-Cunningham friendship is unlike anything we've seen in the WNBA. Clark once described Cunningham on a podcast as the biggest dork she's ever met, and somehow a generational talent at the same time. Clark commented on Cunningham's Instagram, full of glamorous vacation photos, with one line, "Do you play basketball?" They're part of a trio with Lexi Hull that fans have nicknamed the Tres Leches, best friends on and off the court who make every practice, every shoot around, every road trip something worth showing up for. They match outfits, they roast each other constantly online. Cunningham was Clark's celebrity caddy at an LPGA Pro-Am event. Their bond isn't a marketing story cooked up by the team's PR department, it's real. It's documented in thousands of moments that fans have watched and shared and fallen in love with, and it's one of the main reasons the Indiana Fever are the most watched team in the WNBA right now. It's worth pausing for a second to talk about what Cunningham actually brings on the court, because sometimes the culture conversation overshadows the basketball reality. She averaged just under 10 points per game last season before the injury, shooting an efficient percentage from 3. She guards wings, she draws charges, she makes the extra pass. She doesn't need the ball to impact the game, which makes her uniquely valuable on a team built around Clark's playmaking. She's the player every championship roster needs. High IQ, high motor, completely unbothered by the spotlight. She just does her job, and her job on most nights involves making sure Caitlin Clark has one less problem to think about. And then came the injuries. Last season, the Fever lost 4 key players at once. Clark with a groin strain, Cunningham with a torn MCL, Arai McDonald with a broken foot, Sydney Colson with a torn ACL. 4 players down simultaneously. That team, decimated, shorthanded, playing on fumes, still pushed pushed all the way to Game 5 of the WNBA semifinals. Through all of it, Cunningham and Clark were on that bench together every single game at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, leading the sideline energy, refusing to let the rest of the team quit. That's not just a teammate, that's the connective tissue of a championship culture. So why would Toronto, or Portland for that matter, want her? Here's what people miss about expansion teams. They're not just building a basketball roster, they're building an identity from scratch in a city with no WNBA history, trying to sell tickets to fans who've never cared about women's basketball before. Toronto Tempo isn't just looking for players who can score 20 points a night, they're looking for players who make other players better, players who create moments, players who make people care. Sophie Cunningham does all of that. She's the kind of player who fills a gym with energy before she even touches the ball. In Toronto, she wouldn't just be a role player, she'd be a cornerstone, the human face of a brand new franchise with built-in national attention because of her relationship with the most recognizable player in the league. Every time the Tempo hosts the Fever, every time Clark comes to town, the Sophie Caitlin storyline writes itself. That's not just basketball value, that's franchise building value. The Portland Fire faces the same calculus. Any team with a pick and the brains to use it on Cunningham isn't drafting a basketball player. They're drafting a storyline, a fan base, and a marketing campaign all at once. And here's where it gets truly complicated for Indiana. The Toronto Tempo could potentially designate Cunningham as a core player under the new CBA rules. That means even though Cunningham is technically an unrestricted free agent, meaning she could theoretically choose not to honor a selection and sit out, the core designation could lock her in for at least one season, preventing an immediate return to Indiana in free agency. So even if Cunningham wanted to go back to the Fever, the rules might not allow it, at least not right away. No coming back in free agency, no quick reunion, no picking up where they left off, just gone and staying gone. This is the impossible math that general manager Amber Cox and team president Kelly Krauskopf are staring at right now. They have 5 spots, they have 6 players worth protecting, and one of them, the one who arguably means the most to the culture and identity they've spent 2 years building, has to be left out in the cold. The protection lists are expected to be due around April 1st. The expansion draft follows days later. The clock is ticking on one of the most important decisions this franchise has ever faced, and here's what makes it even harder. Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf can't just pick the best 5 players and move on. They have to think about team chemistry, locker room dynamics, cap implications, and what message they send to every other player on the roster. Because the player you leave unprotected isn't just potentially leaving the team, she's watching you make the decision to leave her behind. For Indiana, this isn't just a roster decision, it's a question about what kind of team they want to be. The Fever have a legitimate championship window. Clark and Boston are in their prime, the coaching staff is dialed in, the city is sold out. But championship windows don't just require talent, they require trust. They require locker room culture, they require the kind of glue that keeps a team together when the losses pile up and the injuries hit and the pressure gets unbearable. And Sophie Cunningham is that glue. She has been from day one. She changed what it meant to be a Fever player. She made the Fever worth watching even when they weren't winning. She gave Caitlin Clark someone to stand next to when everything else was falling apart. And in 2 weeks, that might all come to an end. Not because the Fever failed, not because anyone was traded or cut, not because the relationship broke down, but because 2 new teams are being handed the legal right to take her. The WNBA is a beautiful game, but sometimes the business of it is absolutely brutal.